Let's go ahead and start with Kraven the Hunter, because that's a movie that came out. Like we were saying, this is a pretty dry time for movies, so maybe Sony thought they could sneak this one in, get a little hit on the books. Aaron Taylor Johnson playing Kraven, that's about it. It was 16% on Rotten Tomato. It was anyone 35% on Metacritic, 5.4 on IMDb. 59% of Google users like the movie. That is a low Google users. Google users love everything. Directed by J.C. Chander. He hasn't really done anything else, but that is pretty on par with Sony projects. I don't think many big name directors want to touch these movies at all, and for good reason. As we've seen, with Madam Web, with Morbius, these movies aren't well thought out. I honestly haven't even put enough care in to know what is wrong with this movie. I just feel like I know.
Yeah, the writing's pretty much always been on the wall with these movies. After like Venom 2 and Morbius, like the Morbiuses and the Madam Web start coming out. But it just felt like this movie was always doomed to fail. Like nobody ever thought this movie was going to be good. Everything that we ever heard about this movie just kind of seemed like they weren't going by the source material. They weren't they weren't connecting it to anything. Like, so from the beginning, it just felt doomed to fail. And then when you have, you probably need a bigger name if you do want to just make people watch the movie. Like if you would have got, I don't know, an Oscar Isaac, somebody like that, maybe you would have got a little bit more people to go watch it. I don't know if Aaron Taylor Johnson is that big of a name. He is a pretty big name, but I don't know if he's enough to be the sole draw of a movie,
Tom Hardy would have killed this.
Yeah, I mean, you should just have Tom Hardy play every single Spider-Man villain.
Just in the Sony universe, yeah.
Have a Tom Hardy Doc Ock, a Tom Hardy Venom, Tom Hardy Electro, Tom Hardy Kraven the Hunter, and then just have a Sinister Six of just all Tom Hardys. That would have been sick.
Honestly, that sounds like a better idea than what they're doing somehow. Looking at the reviews, I can't even distinguish a defining feature about this movie. It's just a lot of the stuff I'm seeing is just bland, soulless, joyless. Lots of shots of the backs of people's heads, I guess. Aaron Taylor Johnson was a miscast. Yeah, about as exciting as the board meeting which it sprung from. I think a Kraven the Hunter movie could be interesting, could be super interesting. But when it's Sony making the movie, I just couldn't bring myself to even look into it. I didn't even watch a trailer for this thing. I had such little hopes, and we watch movie trailers for this all the time. It just didn't line up that we watched that one. I didn't care to go. If the demographic is missing me, I can't imagine what the general audiences are thinking about Kraven the Hunter.
Yeah. Did you happen to see what the Sony CEO said regarding all of these movies and how they flop? So he said he insists that Madam Web isn't terrible and that the press just crucified it. So basically saying they put out a hit.
Okay.
And he said that he'll live and die by, and Madam Web is not a bad movie.
Right. I mean, it's got a 55% on the audience score.
He said people on Netflix loved it.
Yeah, they love it.
Maybe that was the problem. Maybe they should have just sold it to Netflix and made it a Netflix original. Be like, hey, look, Netflix has an original Spider-Man movie coming out. Don't you want to watch it? And then people are like, oh, this is basically free. It's on my TV already. That's how they should have released Madam Web and any single other Spider-Man spinoff movie, if we're being honest.
I mean, it has a 2.5 on, I think this is Google reviews. I don't know exactly, but there's 9,000 ratings. It looks like about 5,000 of them are 1 star and 3,000 of them are 5 stars. So there's a split. There's a divide.
Yeah.
I haven't watched this movie, but we were discussing before that we were going to do just a Sony universe retrospective. So we're going to be forced to watch this movie. We'll try to get that in before award season because I assume we're going to be trying to watch all the best picture noms as well.
Yep.
So we got a lot of movies coming up here on the pipeline, but we'll be covering like just the Sony universe in general. We're assuming that Kraven is the last entry, but I feel like I've assumed a lot of things are the last entry, but I don't think there's anything else coming down the pipeline. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't think so. They said that, they basically said that this is the end of the Sony verse. So they're not making any more. They're going to continue on with the into the Spider-Verse series, but basically the Sonyverse is dead.
I really don't understand why they never like tried to actually do Spider-Man. I know they can't do Spider-Man, but why didn't they try to do like one of the actual Spider-Man and like put a budget to it? Like,
yeah, like they should have done like a Miguel O'Hara movie.
You could have done Spider-Man 2099. That would have been a fairly big budget to do. I know aren't they doing a Spider-Man noir like live action thing?
Yep, with Nick Cage.
That's a TV show, isn't it?
TV show, yep. And there's a set picture actually of him in his full Spider-Man noir garb, like riding on top of a car. So we're gonna get some action scenes, potentially just for a flashback, but they say that he fights somebody like in episode 1. So maybe it's like a thing where, you know, he's no longer wearing the suit. Maybe there's just a flashback, but we'll have to see. But Nick Cage signing on makes me at least intrigued to watch it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just it's so strange with like, especially like with how Into the Spider-Verse created like all of this buzz around these different Spider-Men that they kept choosing to do villains instead of doing like Penny Parker or Spider-Man Noir. Like this Nick Cage series, it might be decent. Like I said, I'm interested because it's Nick Cage. He would have been a better box office draw than Kraven the Hunter, Aaron Taylor Johnson. Like, why not make that movie? He wants to do it. Like, I don't understand the decision making at Sony that they kept going down this route. And like the canceled projects are honestly just as bad as the ones that were made. It's wild how they didn't have a good idea pretty much ever. Yeah.
They just always seem to just be at a loss, like of what to do when like they literally have the most recognizable comic book character of all time.
So. There's also like anti-heroes that they could have done movies about, like Prowler. You could have done a Prowler movie with Donald Glover. Maybe not. I don't know if Donald Glover would sign on for that, but there's so much stuff. So much they could have done, and they squandered it. And they released another movie under 20% on Rotten Tomato, which is kind of impressive from a studio.
Yeah. And I mean, there was another report that came out saying that sticking on the Madam Web, but Madam Web was the only Marvel or DC title to be excluded from even being eligible for a Best Picture nomination.
Eligible? What? Yeah. I would be curious what determines eligibility, if it's budget, if it's like just review scores, or
doesn't it doesn't meet the Academy's diversity and inclusion requirement to be nominated.
What?
Let me look up this.
Well, Trent is looking into this. I'm very interested as to in my head. I see a lot of like the Madam Web. There's people of color, there's women, there's probably a man in there. Like what do we need to include here? Was there not enough Irish people? Well, we're looking into that. I'm gonna pull up some of these Sony universe cancellations because I know there was I think like a Bad Bunny, like the artist Bad Bunny was going to be in movie. It looks like honestly we might just cut this because I'm not finding anything.
So maybe okay, so I think so it doesn't say exactly why it was excluded, but it says that many people theorize that the word on the street is that the film didn't hit the diversity benchmarks in inclusive casting in crew roles. So maybe they didn't have maybe like everyone behind the camera was a white man, but it's very interesting.
That is that's not something that.
And apparently this is a new thing. Apparently this is a new thing. Apparently the Oscar the Academy of Motion Pictures has just like implemented this type of diversity, raise criteria, representation and inclusion standards for excellence. So
I guess that makes sense as to why it's the first. Because I'm just thinking like what would be the criteria that we're going to like be like, oh yeah, Incredible Hulk, we're gonna nominate, or you know, any of these other very poor. Do you say Marvel and DC or just Marvel?
Yeah, Marvel and DC. So
like Catwoman.
That technically means Kraven too even met the standards of being eligible to get nominated for a Best Picture, which that's the headline right there.
Well, when we go into our Best Pictures, I will read up on this a bit more, see if we can get you guys answer of like what exactly the criteria is with this new diversity standards. But interesting nonetheless. But yeah, that's pretty much a cap on the Sony universe. I think we could put this honestly below the Dark Universe. Like if you're going to tier rank universe, like the Dark Universe had one entry and they were like, this is bad. And they stopped.
They're like, we gotta get out. We're not feeling this.
Yeah,
but you gotta respect it.
Yeah, for anyone who's unaware that the Dark Universe is just the Mummy. They planned on having a bunch of like public domain, like Frankenstein, all of these like horror movies. It was when like the Avengers was really big and everyone was like, how do we do this with no IPs? And so they made the Mummy and it flopped and the universe flopped, but they stopped. They didn't keep going.
Yeah. But you know, Ty, luckily you can go check out the Dark Universe at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida. Because I'm pretty sure they have a whole Dark Universe section of their park dedicated to the Dark Universe. So you could go check that out.
As they should.
It's not dead. It lives on in infamy.
Honestly, I would like if Sony made the hallway with all the like villain like things that the guy is walking past. You know what I'm talking about in that Amazing Spider-Man 2 after credit scene. If they made that hallway, I'd walk down that hallway and I'd feel so I'd be lit. I'd be lit for sure if I got to walk down the hallway. The villain origins hallway.
Hell yeah. They should add that to Disneyland. Right in front of the collectors thing. They should have the Sony hallway. Sony after credits hallway. But yeah, I won't miss it, and it'll definitely be back somehow. I don't know what happened to Amy, I think was her name. That would just like, she'd like get on interviews with Kevin Feige and she'd be like, yeah, the universes, they're connected. And then Kevin Feige would be like, no, they're not. Yeah.
But she would always word it super weird. She'd be like, they're in the same space in time, and they could meet up in a way.
Yeah.
And then Kevin's just sitting there, just like stone faced, hat forward, not emoting at all, internally screaming. And I think that's a good metaphor for the Sony universe, is just hanging on to Marvel, internally screaming.